Greetings. By virtue of your presence watching this video today, I want you to know that we consider you to be an extended member of our family at Unity in Linwood. We believe that you are an individualized expression of that one creative impetus which stands behind all life, and as such we celebrate the uniqueness which you are, and we celebrate our unity with you. We are glad you're with us.
And she gets excited later on. Her name is Marianne Williamson. I grabbed that snippet with my phone. I was at the Parliament of World Religions in Salt Lake City, where our LDS brothers and sisters had welcomed a contingency of 10,000 Sikhs and Methodists and Buddhists and agnostics and atheists and Zoroastrians. It was a powerful, powerful experience. The choir had prepared music representing every world tradition and so warmly welcomed us into their home. We are the proud producer and hosting organization of Marianne Williamson's Love America Tour, Seattle. If you are unaware of this, we hope you will join us. She will present at the Edmonds Center for the Arts. Tickets are available through their website. If you will indulge me, please consider going to Unity in Linwood's page and sharing this event with your friends as well. Let's get the word out. She has an important message. Speaking of Parliament of the World's Religions, we have a number of trips planned in 2019. You are cordially welcome to join us for any and all. For example, the Unity People's Convention in Kansas City is slated for this June. We promise to take excellent care of you. We know our way around that town if you were to choose to travel with us. Also, the regional conference is slated for Corbett, Oregon in September. Matthew and I have been invited to be the featured musicians for that event. Also, we have Parliament of the World's Religions starting November 1 again, and that will be held in Toronto. If you have questions about any or all of these, feel free to see Matthew or ring the office. Linda Martella Whitsett, thank you for that introduction, Linda. She is the director of Silent Unity. In addition to being an acclaimed author, she will be with us on June 22nd and 23rd. $99 buys you a catered menu throughout the weekend, all materials as well. It is Friday evening and all day Saturday with the theme, Divine Audacity. Isn't that a great title? I wish I had written that. A couple weeks from now and I might. Divine Audacity, embody your true self. Please consider that. Next Sunday is, and registration is available through the Unity in Linwood website, unityinlinwood.org. Thank you, Linda. Next Sunday is Memorial Day Sunday, and what is becoming something of a tradition at Unity in Linwood, I would like your stories, please. You have a couple more days to submit them to me. And you know the stories I'm talking about. They're the stories that will be told at your funeral. Yes, that story. Let's not wait to truly see each other. Let's not wait. Fair enough? You're in for a treat this morning. You're in for a treat. Practical spirituality, welcoming community. It is our admittedly short mission statement that I believe speaks volumes. Every week I like to support this with one of the 6 bullet points which we developed in conversation with your board of trustees. Take a deep breath. See if this is a position in consciousness, a spiritual value, if you will, with which you can align. Today's reads as follows. We actively seek and enthusiastically include truths from all great spiritual traditions. Can you make peace with that? The words belong to Fillmore. You're welcome to take them with me if you so choose. I am now in the presence of pure being. Together. I am now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge your presence and your power, O blessed Spirit. I acknowledge your presence and your power, O blessed Spirit, in your divine wisdom. In your divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations. Now erase my mortal limitations. And from your pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world. Bring into manifestation my world according to your perfect law. She's one of my greatest teachers. Will you welcome your associate minister? Her name is Reverend Nina Clark, please.
I've been told not to mess with the microphones. Turned it off and on a few times first service before we got it live there. And so, a few days ago, a young man in Texas takes the life of 10 people, wounding several others. Would you join me by going within and finding a resting place in the power and presence, love, and wisdom that is God? 2 weeks ago, Dr. Richard raised this very question. How can we respond when terrible or difficult things happen in our world? To quote, how do we contribute to evolution and unfoldment while practicing a consciousness of non-resistance? Are we to challenge inequity in our world? And if so, how do we do so in a manner that doesn't heighten the problem? How do I say no in my world in ways that are healthy, in ways that are productive? And the answer was quite simple and beautiful. If we meet anger with anger, fear with fear, hatred with hatred, we amplify anger, fear, and hatred. But if we meet these with love, with compassion, with a higher wisdom, we have the opportunity to transform them. So I would invite each of you into a moment of silence within. Sit with the infinite wisdom and the love of the God of your heart. Let the love that is there, let the wisdom that is there infuse your being. Let this bring you to center. And then let your personal decision of response, words you're moved to speak or write, actions you're moved to take, energy or prayers you're moved to offer, let them come from this place of higher vibration. Let us be the change we want to see. Thank you. And so it is. Years ago, when I was in a writing conference breakout group, the presenter shared that she felt there were two kinds of writers. Ones who created a detailed outline of the story, all chapters pre-planned, story arc known before the first word is written, and others for whom the story unfolded as they wrote. She likened the latter group to walking down a forest path at night, no moon, with only a pin-sized beam from a weak flashlight illuminating the next couple of feet along the path, never more. I'm that latter writer with the feeble penlight shuffling my way down the path. I'm also the writer for whom an idea and some sort of opening usually appear together, often more than one, and I play with them until the right one emerges, along with the right first sentence, and then it's off to the races, or more like peering down the path while shuffling along with my weak flashlight. But for this talk, the idea appeared, but no opening. Middles and endings, paragraphs and quotes, bits of this and that, but no opening. I knew what I wanted to talk about, but I just couldn't for the life of me find a springboard to launch from. After much struggle and a fast approaching deadline, I decided to ask myself why I was having such a hard time getting started. And the answer turned out to be, because I feel vulnerable. This is hard stuff. This is new thought, for goodness sake. We're the positive, always happy people, right? So what do we do when stuff hits the fan when we get sick or lose a job or a marriage with all of this positive, affirmative stuff that we're doing. This is a very vulnerable place for most of us because this is where all the fear is, all the shame, all the self-doubt, the deprecating self-talk. We tend to go into hiding when things aren't golden, and we historically haven't talked about it in New Thought circles, except perhaps behind closed doors. As an example of this, take the section on chemicalization, which is a fancy way of saying when stuff hits the fan, in Emily Cady's book, Lessons in Truth. It was removed after the 1942 edition because it was thought to be too negative and confusing. And it didn't find its way back into print until 2005. And the reason it was returned, according to the footnote, was because people were experiencing stuff hitting the fan with great regularity. And it was decided, and I quote, they would benefit by reading about it. And truth be told, while my certainty about the truth of how this works is strong, I have some fear about sharing this with you because some really hard questions without concrete answers are triggered by this topic. But I also think it's important, and so I'm choosing to not let my fear get the better of me. And so I'm going to start by telling you a story, my story. I stumbled upon New Thought in 1995 while navigating a stalled sales career. I decided to take a weekend prosperity seminar with the intent of expanding my business. I don't remember much of it, other than the fact that he wore a really nice suit, talked about vipers, the car, not the snake, and that we may have done some things that involved magazine photos and glue. But I do remember his final words like they were etched on the inside of my head. He ended the seminar by saying, I believe that we all need a place of spiritual nourishment. And for me, that place is Unity in Linwood, Unity Church. It would have been nice, Unity in Linwood, but Unity Church. Then he said something about religious science being similar, and then it was over. Or at least I don't remember anything after that. And the words spiritual nourishment got my attention. And so a couple of weeks later, I found myself in a religious science church. I had tried positive thinking types of things prior, but felt that they hadn't worked for me. In fact, it seemed like every time I tried something affirmative, all heck broke loose. Clearly, I was doing something wrong, and so I was both excited and dubious as to how my life might change by applying what I was learning in religious science. But I immersed myself in truth and principle. I started taking classes, doing daily affirmations, meditating, and practicing affirmative prayer. And for the first couple of weeks, things were pretty good. I was feeling excited and positive. I was waiting for wonderful things to happen. And then our VW bus engine caught fire as it was pulling into a gas station. They're running out. Stop. Getting it fixed meant our already stretched income had to be stretched even tighter. My business sales were not increasing. In fact, they were declining. Financially, I felt like I was going backwards rather than forwards. Old feelings of being unlovable resurfaced, of being not enough. Feelings of inadequacy and fear raised their familiar heads. And it never occurred to me that this might just be part of the process because no one talked about it. I didn't see any mention of this kind of thing in the books I was reading, nor was it mentioned in the classes I was taking. No one said, and by the way, sometimes things seem to get worse before they get better, but don't worry about it. It's part of the process. And so I felt like a New Thought failure. I was embarrassed to bring it up to someone because all I was hearing about was how well it worked for others. For example, in one prosperity book I was encouraged to read, it said, and I quote, and with breathtaking rapidity, these ideas worked for all types of people. For instance, within a week after the first lecture, 2 secretaries had received increases in pay. A stockbroker soon reported that he had more business than he dared hope for. There were stories of healings and new relationships and increased peace and joy, and this was all great for them. But it wasn't showing up in my life. It wasn't that I thought it wouldn't work. It clearly did. But for some reason, it wasn't working for me, and I didn't understand why it wasn't. And then finally, I did start to hear a trickle of stories spoken in hushed whispers during class breaks or in the parking lot after church service. One woman lost her job, and it appeared she might lose her house. Another was struggling with the return of some old health issues. Another student's marriage fell apart. When we collectively worked up the courage to ask what we might be doing wrong, such a vulnerable place. The response was discomfort, shaming, and avoidance. The message seemed to be that only the success stories were of interest. The rest of us were somehow new thought misfits. I became discouraged and quit trying. I didn't quit New Thought because I felt there was more to the story than externals. I just quit trying to put the teachings into practice for positive change in my outer life. And then New Thought minister Emmett Fox opened a door for me on day 363 of his book, Around the Year with Emmett Fox. It was just one small paragraph, but it opened the door to possibility. Emmett said, "People often find that the starting of this 7-day mental diet seems to stir up difficulties. It seems as though everything begins to go wrong at once. This may be disconcerting. You think? But it really is a good sign. Suppose your whole world seems to rock on its foundations. Hold on steadily, let it rock, and when the rocking is over, the picture will have reassembled itself into something much nearer to your heart's desire." If Emmett Fox had still been alive, I would have kissed him. What a tremendous relief. He said it was a good sign. Those things happening in my life didn't mean I was doing something wrong. I wasn't a failure. Quite the contrary. They were, in fact, an indication that I was doing things very much right. What, you say? When I get sick, I'm doing something right? When my car breaks down, I'm doing something right? When I lose my job, I'm doing something right? When I'm filled with doubt and fear and old habits I thought vanquished reappear, I'm doing something right? Or just as discouraging, when it seems nothing is happening, am I really doing something right? And the answer is yes. When you are practicing affirmative prayer and affirmations and speaking capital T truth to yourself and putting unity principles and practices into action in your life and stuff hits the fan, when you are actively working to change your consciousness and stuff on the outside appears to fall apart, yes. In fact, it is a validation that a change in your consciousness is underway. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but this was our beloved Myrtle's experience as well. Myrtle's healing was not a straight path to health. Here is Myrtle describing her process. She'd begun by telling her body that it was intelligent, by praising it, by affirming God's life, substance, and intelligence. And then she says, "I did not get entirely well and strong all at once. There were a few times after my first discoveries and healings when I felt the need of holding on tight. There was one time when I felt the old familiar heaviness, pain, and smothering in chest, and the aching all through the body, which meant pneumonia." And in another letter, Myrtle says, "As I have before stated, these changes were not accomplished all at once. There has been a gradual giving away of the old established ideas as we have steadfastly made room for the higher order of living. Do not think that it was always a pathway of roses or that my head was continually above the clouds. We had many trying tests, reverses of fortune, apparent loss of friends, humiliations of many kinds, and what seemed to be serious illness in the family." I gotta say, I love me some Myrtle. It just doesn't get any more real than this. Our dear beloved Myrtle did not experience overnight success. Her path to healing took time and persistence. She experienced what felt like setbacks, stalls, and full stops along her healing journey, and she writes about them with a loving honesty that I truly admire. So there it is, out in the open. Stuff does hit the fan, and it's a good thing. But inquiring minds might want to know why this happens. Unity calls this process chemicalization, and Emily Cady's resurrected text explains it. To quote, "Suppose a man has lived in wrong," and we would use the word error today instead of wrong, Suppose a man has lived in wrong thought and molded his body by wrong thought for years, until, as you might say, he's become solidified in that wrong belief. You introduce the truth to him, and the very newness of it, and because it is truth, creates in the first few days new hope, new joy, and health. After a little time, a sort of mental ferment or agitation takes place. One is apt to feel nervous and seared way down in the depths of himself. If he has ever been sick, he will begin to feel old diseases. If he has been morally bad, then old desires and habits will take possession of him with new force. If he has been holding denials and affirmations about business affairs until they have looked hopeful, all at once they collapse and seem darker and more hopeless than ever. All the new beliefs that lifted him into a new world for a few days seem failures, and he seems on the very verge of breaking up generally. What has happened? Why, simply this. There has been a clash between the old condition, which was based on falsehood, fear, and wrong ways of thinking, and the new thought of truth entering into you. The old mortal is kicking vigorously against the truth. You have a feeling of discouragement or fear, a feeling such as one would have if caught at something disreputable. Do not be frightened. That which you feel is, on the spiritual plane, a similar excitement and agitation to that which is seen in the chemical action between the alkali and acid on the material plane. And something higher and better always results. Thank you, Emily Cady. So, said another way, everything we believe in is in our consciousness somewhere, whether conscious or unconscious, and it walks around with us everywhere we go, every day. Whenever we raise our vibration through the use of affirmative prayer or any practice that focuses on truth and remembering our God nature, chemicalization can occur. Sometimes its effect is mild, and sometimes not so much, depending on how deeply held the belief or beliefs are that need to be released or transmuted. The difference for me now is that when this happens, I no longer look at things that come up as I'm shifting vibration as bad or negative. I look at them as signs that the work I'm doing in consciousness is working. Even if I don't feel much like yelling, "Hallelujah," I remind myself that this is something that is in between me and where I want to vibrate. Please don't hear this to mean that I stroll through each layer of stuff when it hits the fan. Ask my family. It just means that when I get lost in those outer circumstances, I have practices in place so that I can catch myself faster and faster and return to center, to my practice. Easier during the mild chemicalizations, harder when it's deeper stuff. So here is where the hard questions come up. So if this is true, then does this mean I'm responsible for the stuff that comes up? Did I create it? This is what my favorite New Thought author, Frederick Bales, has to say about this. The real cause of sickness is found in tangled emotions, in the fears and anxieties, the jealousies and envies, the frustrations and bafflements, engendered by the attempts of men and women to achieve happiness and to meet the demands of modern life. Childhood impressions and teachings may be contributory causes. The impact of the myriad minds that surround them has a determining influence. The conversation of friends and relatives affects them. Add to this the news of the day, weather, health warnings, state of the economy, the job market. All of this combines, he says, to build up in the minds of the people a great subjective body of fear thought that affects the human organism day and night, asleep and awake, even though the one so affected may be entirely unaware of it. In my opinion, this may be still only a partial answer. We may not be able to know completely what your soul or my soul is here to experience or create this time around the sun. And that's part of the mystery of life. And so we may not be able to change every circumstance of our lives. But I do also believe that what Frederick Bales says is true, that part of what we experience is the result of a tangled conglomeration of beliefs. Are we responsible for those? Let me answer that with a question. Is a 7-year-old responsible for believing his Uncle Andrew every time he pats him on the head proudly and says, "When you can make $20,000 a year like your Uncle A, then, my boy, you'll be someone"? And once that man, that incident long forgotten, and once a man, that incident long forgotten, he cannot make more than $20,000 a year? Or is another child responsible for her fear of abandonment that now affects her ability to trust because her primary caregiver left when she was 6 or 10 or 14? Is the 13-year-old responsible for believing her Aunt Melanie when she told her, "You're such a difficult child. Who could love you?" Or another child for believing the teacher who told him, "You're not very bright, are you?" This is the kind of stuff and more that comes up during chemicalization. And very often we don't even remember where it came from. But the belief remains and has been steering our boats for a long time. Are we responsible for believing that? Did we create that? And honestly, if stewing over the answer to that difficult, if not impossible question stops you from acting on the solution, then I believe it's a question that's not worth your time or mine. Because the work, no matter whether your answer to the question of responsibility and creation is yes or no, your work is the same. Keep your attention on truth, on God. Keep your practice consistent, persistent, and compassionate. When Myrtle was doing her personal healing work, she wrote the following about it. "I did not become discouraged at her cells, being slow to wake up, but kept right on, both silently and aloud, declaring the words of truth. When Myrtle felt pneumonia coming on, when she felt that ache, that heaviness, that smothering in her chest, which meant to her pneumonia, she said, I kept holding that God, my Father, was my health and my strength. And the result was that I did not have pneumonia." And the last thing she said was, "We had many trying tests, reverses of fortune, apparent loss of friends, humiliations of many kinds, and what seemed to be serious illness in the family. And through it all, we held unwaveringly to the principles that we caught sight of in that first lesson, and we have proved beyond a doubt that God is a help in every time of need." And it's easy to become discouraged when it feels like we're not making progress, or that we're even moving backwards rather than forward. When I get discouraged, I find it helpful to think of this analogy that I learned from Esther Hicks or Abraham, teachers. I imagine a habit of thought that we've had for a long time. Let's just say, for example's sake, I believe that I'm unlovable. And every time I speak or say or think something about my unlovableness, a little bit of gray smoke fills my consciousness and also kind of puffs out in front of me in the timeline that is my future. You can imagine that after months or years of this, there might be quite a bit of that gray smoke in my consciousness and also in the days, weeks, and months in front of me as I create through this belief. Then I discover unity or new thought teachings. I begin to say capital T truths to myself and to affirm my lovability. And each time I do this with heartfelt earnestness and emotion, a little bit of turquoise smoke fills my consciousness and puffs out in front of me. At first, it can hardly be seen for all the gray smoke. And so most of my experiences seem to still support my old habit of belief. And if I give up now, I will think the process doesn't work. But if I keep going, keep my practice alive, slowly, slowly, the turquoise smoke is more visible until it becomes equal to the gray. Now, of course, sometimes I forget and I say or think something unlovable and out puffs some of the old gray smoke, and that can slow things down a little bit. But as I get better at catching myself and turning my attention back to God, back to truth, slowly, slowly, my consciousness begins to change, and my outward experience begins to reflect that change. People smile at me more. I make a new friend. I keep practicing, my attention focused even more diligently on truth, and the turquoise now is the dominant color in my consciousness, and my life reflects more and more love. It's simple, but it's not easy. We are told that the spiritual path is a hard one, and this is not because you're up against your deepest beliefs, and this is because you're up against your deepest held beliefs about what you're not. When your life seems to be one big swirling flush of water, keep your thoughts on the highest truths you know. Dig in deeper to the truth you know it to be. Find bedrock. Repeat or read words that wash the truth deeper and deeper into your pores. Think about God. Think about what God is to you. Pray. Read or repeat affirmations. Take classes. Visit our prayer chaplains. Let them remind you of the truth of you. Come pray with Dr. Richard or myself. Just don't give up. So if you're new or newerish to Unity teachings and you find yourself feeling like stuff is hitting the fan, pat yourself on the back. You're doing just fine. And if you've been around for a while and you find yourself thinking, what the heck? Pat yourself on the back and hear Myrtle's words. The unpleasant condition is just temporary, and it is dissolved by the truth you are and have been thinking. I'd like to leave you with this. As we look around at the dear faces around us, know that behind some of the smiles you see might be someone who's in the midst of chemicalization, someone who is struggling with an old idea of themselves, someone who has some stuff whirling around on the fan blades of life. Be kind. Let us be compassionate with each other as we raise our vibration together. Let us be each other's cheerleader. Let us affirm each other and support each other. Let us strive to always offer the highest truth to the person we see in front of us. I love you all. Thank you.
Wow. Can you relate? Chemicalization, like the analogy of a chemical reaction between unlike substances, an emotional or spiritual reaction of unlike thoughts or beliefs, can be volatile, uncomfortable, even disheartening, even depressing. Are you struggling with something? If so, you're in excellent company. A negative emotion, a doubt, a fear, an old message or belief that no longer serves. You're safe here. Are you feeling the competition between an old thought and a new thought? I am. Let's go within. Breathe into those tender spaces. Hold them gently. Hold yourself, your whole self, gently. Are you willing in this moment to think a new thought? Place yourself in the light of truth. Bathe any negative old thoughts or beliefs in that light of truth. Let them react and transmute in the alchemy of consciousness, catalyzed by a new thought and becoming the building blocks of an evolving you. We are called by Christ consciousness to love one another as self. After all, we are all of the same God substance, let's begin by loving ourselves. In all of our complexity, in all of our so-called imperfections, our wounds, our ailments, our erroneous beliefs. Let us bathe ourselves in love as a new thought of really believing that we too are of that same God stuff as every other beautiful thing in this world. We love ourselves by being willing to be that which is God, because, as Reverend Nina likes to say, we cannot not be. We let it be, and we love ourselves just a tiny bit more with every new thought, with every allowing of truth. And as we love ourselves, we can love each other and bring peace to the world, one interaction at a time, rippling outward like waves from a pebble in a pond. This is how we be the change. This is how we think globally and act locally. Let your prayer this day be for your own true healing, one breath at a time, one prayer at a time. Everything else will follow. Amen, and so it is.
Thanks again for joining us. Please visit unityinlinwood.org for a preview of all upcoming classes, services, and events, and for an opportunity to make a gift to our community should you so choose. Thank you.